Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyid al-Mursaleen wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Wa ba'd. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, my beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, our viewers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, this is another great opportunity to feast in the knowledge that has come to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the knowledge based upon the revelation, Al-Quran, also based upon the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the living experience of Muslims from the time of the last Prophet up until today. This is a great reservoir of knowledge. It is the living experience of people who believe in Allah, who tried to follow the Prophet, peace be upon him, who came from different cultures, who spoke different languages, whose circumstances were different based upon the environment, based upon the politics of the world at that time. But what was constant is the fact that there's a revelation, that there is a straight path, a sirat al-mustaqim. And so the believers try to stay on the straight path as much as they possibly can. And when the darkness comes in, Allah Azza wa Jal has promised us, after difficulty, ease; after darkness, there would be light. And so we are studying the transition from the darkness into the light. Pivotal moments when Muslims came out of very difficult circumstances and were able to come back to practice Islam in the best way that they possibly could. This is relevant to us today because we are going through unprecedented changes. There are things happening in the world, in the Middle East, especially in Palestine, in Asia, in Africa, in the Americas, in all parts of this planet. The way the climate is reacting to human pollution, the way our societies are imploding on themselves because of being based on exploitation, and the way human beings are reacting to each other, it's unprecedented. Not evil or viciousness or divisiveness. That's something that has been on earth from the beginning of humanity. But it is the level that it's gone to. And with the technology that we have, with the social media that we have, we are able to actually follow the details of what people are doing to each other in real time. And so it's a shock. And sometimes even believers who feel that they have been practicing Islam all their life, that they understand this deen, when they see certain things happen, they're shaken to the core. And sometimes you hear people of all different levels. And you even heard the companions of the Prophet ﷺ saying, Meta Nasrullah, when will the help of Allah come? And so that transition is close. And as Allah said, Allah inna nasrullahi qareeb, that the help of Allah is close. The transition. And so the pivotal moments. And we had been looking at a very traumatic period. We're going through a trauma today. There's no doubt about it. But the trauma that people went through in the 13th century may be one of the greatest traumas that human beings have faced, not because of an earthquake or a flood, but basically what they've done to each other. It may be one of the greatest in human history. And that is the time in the 13th century with the rise of the Mongol nation. And Mongolia, in the far north east side of Asia, was a place where people lived in very difficult circumstances. It was a rough environment, cold in the winter, hot in the summer, very little vegetation. And so a rough type of personality developed in order to survive. These were the people of the steppes. These were the Central Asian people who moved from area to area just to find food. It's not the same as somebody who lives in an area where if you throw a seed down on the ground, if you're in the Caribbean or if you're in Malaysia, you throw a mango seed down, you throw a papa seed down, and after a little while, there's a plant coming up. And if you stay for a number of years, you might actually eat the fruit from that plant. You didn't do anything. It's based upon the ni'mah, the blessing of Allah, with the moderate heat, consistent, and also the consistent rain, and so life comes about easily. In the steppes, it's the opposite. It's difficult to find sustained life. And so all levels of existence have struggle. And so it is the basis of this struggle to survive, the basis of the struggle between the tribes that gave birth to Temujin, who was later crowned by the Mongols as the Genghis Khan. And the Genghis Khan, meaning the great leader of the world, he united the tribes of Al-Mughul, of the Mongol people. And he became their first great Kaghan, their great leader. That's in 1206. And from there, he began to expand. And it's important to understand, in looking at this empire, because some historians will actually say that this is maybe the largest continuous empire that ever existed in terms of controlling land, subjugating people from one end all the way from Korea, and then you go west all the way into Eastern Europe. And it's unbelievable what the Mongols conquered in a short period of time. And so in understanding their empire, you need to understand the family tree, because their empire was divided into 4 parts. And if you look at your chart, you will see Genghis Khan, and underneath him, you will see Jochi Khan, and then Chagatai, and Odegai, and Toloi. So these are the 4 major sons of Genghis Khan. He had a lot of children, and they say that the DNA of Mongols is one of the most widespread on earth. But this is the 4 divisions that came about. One division coming from Jochi was called the Golden Horde. That is going toward Russia and Eastern Europe and that side of Central Asia. The other is the Chagatai Khanate, and that is sort of the Central Asia. And then there is the Ilkhanate, and that is the one that covered toward Persia and what is now the Middle East. And then you have the Yuan dynasty of Toloi, and that's the one that had the homeland of Karakum in Mongolia, and then went down into now what is known as China. And so looking at it, this gives you a visual look at the empire. And the empire actually stretched further than this. This is 1260, where it had reached. And so you'll see the empire of the great Khan on the right side, Karakoram. So this is the base. And whoever controls this area is controlling the essence and the base of the Mongol Empire. Then you have just to the west, Chagatai Khanate. North above that, the Khanate of the Golden Horde. And you can see, and it's interesting when you start to look at names of countries and what's happening today, you'll see Kiev right there. And eventually it spread, where they actually conquered what is now Ukraine and those areas, and went down into Poland and into Hungary and these areas there. So the world has changed a lot. But that northern part was what they call the Golden Horde, and then the Ilkhan Empire, and you'll see where that is coming down in Persia, and then going into Iraq, and later on stretching out into the Levant area of Syria and Jordan, coming into Arabia. And so that was the Mongol Empire in the four parts, who are basically directly related to the leader. The allegiance is there. When the leader dies, the great Khan, the families of these four will go back to Karakorum, and they will decide together who would be the next leader. There's going to be dynastic struggle. But this is how the empire stood at that time. And so in this area, the one that is the great Khan Empire, that one was ruled by Kublai Khan. And Kublai Khan, he controlled China, Mongolia, Korea, Tibet, in this area there. And you'll see in the picture the Great Wall of China. And that wall still exists up until today. And it was constructed in order to keep the Mongols out. Think about this. In order to keep them out, this long construction. Imagine what went into this. That this is like, over 1,000 years old, and look at the size of it, and imagine how much it took to build it and to maintain it, because you need to have soldiers there who are guarding in case in one of the areas they attacked. So this is the Great Wall of China, to show you what the Chinese thought in holding them back, but the wall was not impregnable, and the Mongols made it through and ended up controlling a greater part of China. The Ilkhanate, part, this is the key part, which is the third segment. The second segment, of course, was the one of Central Asia. The third was the one that controlled what you call West Asia, maybe today, and eventually moved down not just Persia and Afghanistan and all of those areas, what is now Iran and Iraq, and eventually it destroyed the Abbasid Khilafate. Okay, and so that was the Ilkhanate and the Golden Horde. And this is the key today to our discussion in terms of the Islam of the Mongols. This was the fourth section of the great Mongol Empire. And they controlled up in that northern area. And of course, what was really important for them was the weather and the grassland and the grazing, that actually happened up in that area. And so they literally controlled up there right down into what is now Azerbaijan. And we will see as we go through some of the names that are famous today for incidents that are happening, but what was happening during that time. So what was important to us before was the campaign of the Mongols into now what is known as the Middle East. And you can see following that red arrow coming from the eastern side, they went to Hamdan, and then they went up to Tabriz, and then they went north. Now it's interesting because Tabriz itself, which became the Mongol capital of the Ilkhanate, that's the place where the President Raisi of Iran, may Allah forgive him and all of our leaders, where he was killed along with his companions just the other day. This is an international incident. He was on his way to Tabriz. Okay, so that's a section of Iran today. But in those days, that became the headquarters or the capital of the Mongol Empire. So the people who are living in that area, within their DNA, is Mongolian blood. Because the Mongols changed the whole area. Places like Hamadan that you see, they were like destroying cities completely. Places like Merv, totally destroyed it In some cases, they were killing every man, woman, and child. And their destruction was like no destruction anybody has seen before. And when the Islamic scholars are writing about it, they are actually comparing it to the Day of Judgment. I mean, is this Ya'juj and Ma'juj? Are they Gog and Magog? And some people thought it had to be Gog and Magog. No human beings could do this. And as I said, when they would come to a city and kill 200,000 people and the bodies are laying all over the place, and then they would leave to another city, and some of the people underneath the bodies would be alive. So they would come out and they would try to regroup. And when the Mongols found that out, they said, okay, we'll solve the problem. After we kill them, we'll chop off their heads and make a pyramid of their heads. Because if the head is gone, the body is gone. That is the level of their cruelty. And what they would do also is that they would pick amongst the people, they would look for artisans, scholars, they would look for women that they could use to impregnate. They wouldn't kill everybody. And they would take certain sections. Even some of the soldiers themselves, the people who surrendered, they would offer them to fight or die. And so when they went to the next place, they would dress them in Mongolian-type clothes, put them in the front lines, and let them get shot by the arrows of their own brothers. This is the level of cruelty that the Mongols reached. And so, looking at the map, you see that they traveled from Hamdan to Baghdad. Then they went to Mosul, and then to Mardin, around to Aleppo. So now you're going in Syria now, to what is, Homs, and then down into Damascus. And you see that they went down into Jerusalem. And then they were heading toward one of the great empires still standing, the Mamluk Dynasty in Cairo. They were heading there to finish them off as one of the major powers that's left, and then eventually to go to Mecca and Medina and to destroy everything of Islam. So this was the crisis of the Muslim world at that point in time. So Cairo becomes the new hub for the Muslim world. What was left of the Abbasid Khilafat, they fled to Cairo. The scholars went to Cairo. Artisans went there. Wealthy people, anybody who could make it to this metropolis that was established by Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anh, the Sahaba, and later on it was built up after a period of time by the Fatimids. Then Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, this great sultan, rahimahullah, took it over and established the Sunnah and brought it back into the general fold of Islam. This is the great city of Cairo. And in that city rose up a dynasty that we looked at. This is the Mamluk dynasty. And when we say Mamluk, the word is saying these are slaves. These are people who are controlled by other people. But they went from being in a servile state, although they were brought in as mercenaries or as soldiers, they went from this servile state to eventually being the authorities, the leaders, the sultans in Egypt itself. This was a new dynasty that included some of the greatest single warriors, man to man at that time on earth. As a group, the Mongols no doubt had the group power, but singularly, as a soldier, abilities and skills, purpose, and the ability to last, the Mamluks were unmatchable. And I wanted to mention again the great leader, Sultan Saifuddin Qutuz, because many times when people speak of the Mamluks, they speak about Sultan Baybars. And they make the mistake to think it was Sultan Baybars who actually faced the Mongols. But the reality is that it was Saifuddin Qutuz, who was born, in slavery. He's coming from the area of Persia, Khwarizmi area. Some say he's a descendant of one of the leaders, the great royal family there. He was put into slavery saw his family killed in front of his own eyes and suffered tremendous torture to the point where he was so angry that even the Mongols called him Qutus, which in their language is like an angry bulldog. So look at the face of a bulldog, pit bull terrier, an angry face that itself alone would frighten most people. That's how he looked because of what he suffered in his life. And Saifuddin, rahimahullah, he rose up from his position as one of the Mamluks to be the vice sultan. He was the wazir. And when the sultanate began to shake, he took over and became the actual leader of the dynasty. This was a time when the Seventh Crusade was happening. So the Crusaders were coming out of Europe, trying to attack and focusing on Egypt at that time. And then on the other side is the Mongols, who are threatening. So Muslims are in deep situation at that point in time. Saifuddin, who is one of the great leaders in Islamic history, he did not rule for a long period of time, but his achievements are amazing achievements. And he's one of the people who should be mentioned, but he's very seldom, mentioned. But his role is one of our pivotal points in history. He led by example, and he organized the Egyptians and all those who had fled into that area. He got wealth and zakat and sadaqah from those who could give it. He recruited soldiers from all different types, even other groups of Mamluks who were struggling against him, because there was division even amongst the Mamluks. There was the Bahri Mamluks, there was the Salehi Mamluks. So even though there were division, Saifuddin welcomed the group called the Bahri Mamluks, who were led by Babis. That's where Babis is. And they had fled up into the area of Syria. And when the Mongols were coming, and they felt they had nowhere to go, Saifuddin welcomed them back. This was a great strategic move that Qutuz made at that time. And so he united the believers, led by example, and when the Mongols came, he stood in front of them. They had terrorized the whole Muslim world. When they started to come to an area, just the name of the Mongols, just a letter from them would make people tremble throughout the society. But Saifuddin, rahimahullah, he organized, and he stood in front of the Mongol invasion. And if you look at this map here, you will see how the Mongols are fighting war, there in Halab or Aleppo, and then down into Damascus, they're fighting war, Baalbek, fighting other battles, going all along everywhere they could come, fighting, destroying, until they came into the area of what is now Jordan. Here's a place called Ain Jalut. Some say it's the area where Dawood, Prophet David, peace be upon him, where he slayed the Goliath. So that's the well of Jalut. So it's somewhere, in this area, so they call Ain Jalut. And by the will of Allah, the Mongol division, remember the four parts. This is Ilkhanate now. The Ilkhanate was being led by Hulagu Khan, who was a grandson of Genghis Khan, direct lineage. So Hulagu himself was coming into the area to conquer the Muslim world. And by the will of Allah, the great Khan of the Mongols passed away. So therefore, the leaders of the four families, remember your sections, they had to go back to Karakum in order to consolidate the leadership and to choose another leader so their empire would stay united. He left a group of at the least 20,000, many say they even more. But even that, based upon the reputation of the Mongols, they were undefeated. Based upon this, that was a large army, and it was led by Kitbuga, who was one of his great generals who had been struggling up in the north and eastern Europe. And they met in Ain Jalut, and by the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, Saif ad-Din, with strategy of the Mamluks and strategy of the past, was able to lure them into an area in a classical formation, falling back in the middle and then surrounding them from the sides, and they were able to defeat the Mongols at Ain Jalut. This was a decisive victory, for the Mongols, for the Mamluks over the Mongol Empire. And this took place in July of 1260 on the 8th of September. And again, it was interesting because of the fact that it actually took place in Ramadan. Many times Muslims will look at Ramadan as a time of relaxation, of a time of sleep. No, it's a time of action, and especially in the last 10 days. So this is when it came about. Just imagine this, what they had gone through. And this was our pivotal point in history, and these pivots are being connected together because it's not just a military victory, but it broke the invincibility of the Mongols in the minds of the Muslim world and Europe itself. Unity of Muslims is restored. Self-esteem of the believers. I mean, people are saying it's Gog and Magog, and we're finished. There's nothing else left. Even some people thought that Mecca and Medina would be destroyed, because if they defeated the Mamluks, who would stop them from Mecca and Medina? Nobody. Europe and the rest of the world were all trembling because the Mongols intended to control the whole planet. That was Genghis Khan's idea, and he gave that, he passed it on to his children and his grandchildren. So this is a pivotal point, and this was their empire at that time. And so an apparently invisible, invincible group has a defeat. And many people think that Ain Jalut, although it was an important point, it's a turning point, many people think that that's what defeated the Mongols. But they don't realize this was a factor in the defeat of the Mongols. There were other important factors. There were some that are so important that they could actually be considered to be pivotal moments, in the history of the Muslim world, and really in the history of the planet itself. And so going back to that time, we see that the Mongols' leaders, you have the four sections of it. For the most part, the original Mongol leaders, although they were liberal in many ways, they allowed other religions to come because their animistic religion was so broad-based. They worship Goktengri. This is the sun god. And they had a lot of superstition, and they didn't really have strong sources. And so you find them accepting other religions and, mixing it all up together. And this is a point. This is a serious thing. And again, this is what happens to great religions. When the great religions come into an area and they meet people of lesser faiths. So if the great religion, in this case, Tawheed, monotheism, is taught to the people in a proper way so that they fully understand Tawheed and they get close to the Arabic language, to the Quran, then they're able to purify their deen and raise to a high level of practice. But if they don't, what develops is a type of mixed Islam where they are practicing Islam in the day and magic in the night. And I saw this in West Africa itself, where the people used to worship by these big trees. You have this tree called Boabab tree. And so the people would worship by the trees, and they would feel that there is jinn and spirits by the tree. And one of the great scholars came into an area where there was a huge tree where the people would worship. And he taught them Islam, and alhamdulillah, they embraced Islam. But he found out later from some of his close companions that they would make salat during the day, and at night they go back to the tree. So they were mixing up. This is classical. So the scholar waited until one night, and during the night, with his companions and the believers, he chopped down the tree. So when the people woke up the next day, they looked, they finished salat and went out looking toward the tree. It was gone. And so now he showed them, now you have to cut this off. And this happens to many religions. Up until today, Christianity is a mixture of original Judaism, because the followers of Isa alayhi salam were all Jewish, mixed with superstition. That's why you have Easter. That's why you have bunny rabbits and eggs and fertility cults in the name of a monotheistic religion. So this is similar. And so the Mongols at first resisted certain aspects of Islam. They had their superstitions, and Kublai Khan, and Chagatai, so this would be over in the Chinese Mongolian side, and then the center part. Okay, they actually are recorded to have prohibited halal slaughter. So they did not want halal meat at all. Also, they had a phobia against cleaning things with running water. I don't know logically what was wrong with them, why they couldn't deal with pure running water. But the concept of tahara, the concept of purity and cleaning things like this, maybe in their area they didn't have enough water, they were against it. Also, they were against circumcision. And so they tried to prohibit this, in their areas. In some cases, they even said if you do this, it's punishable by death. Now, going back to the evolution of the Mongol Empire, and that is where the great Khan dies. And you find Hulagu Khan and the other parts of the four groups coming to Karakoram. And Möngke Khan is being enthroned. And so to represent the Golden Horde, one of the sons of Jochi, remember Jochi Khan is the one who established that, one of his sons, Berke Khan, he attended that ceremony. Now, some people say that Berke from a very young age was exposed to Muslims and Islam, because Muslims were, in many of these areas, the ones that were still alive, were the majority of the people. So he was being exposed to Islam, and he started to pick up Islamic ways. Again, that's the hidayah. That's the guidance. And you'll find, some Muslims today enter Islam, and when they enter Islam, they say, I've already been practicing Islam. I just needed to take Shahada. And so it appears that Berke was this type of person. He instituted certain aspects of Islam for the betterment of his people at the time. And so reports come from this enthronement ceremony that the animals that were slaughtered were done in an Islamic fashion, so the meat is halal. Also, when the great Khan was taking his oath, he swore on a Quran. So how did this happen? Many writers will say it is because of Berke Khan. So out of respect for him, because he represents one of the four great sections of the leadership. And so out of respect for him, they allowed this to be instituted in the enthronement. And after this ceremony happened, Berke Khan was on his way back, so he's got to go west. So he's traveling Mongolia and then crossing to the west with Kazakhstan and these areas that we know he's moving west. And a sheikh who's very important to us, again, this is one of our pivotal persons, who is a great person, did a major thing, but it's not necessarily known in our history. And that was Sheikh Saifuddin Barkhazi. And he heard that Berke Khan was on his way through, and he invited him to Bukhara. And Bukhara is the great capital there in Central Asia now. You remember Bukhari Hadiths. So it is what is left of it there. So it's the great capital there in Bukhara. He invited him there, and he had developed his own madrasa. He had survived somehow the onslaught that had happened when the Mongols, and he was strong enough, and he was teaching. And so his way to defend Islam and Muslims was not militarily. His way was spiritually and ideologically. And this is important for Muslims to realize, that the struggle is not just military struggle. And that even when you're looking at the situation in Palestine, the situation of confusion in the Sudan and other places, it's not just about a military thing. A lot has to do today with social media. A lot has to do with economics, right? That's why your boycott, divestment, sanctions is so important. A lot has to do with people entering Islam. Because the more people who accept Islam, especially people who have influence, it's going to help this generation and future generations in taking a stand against the evils that will be continuing to the day of resurrection. So Saifuddin, rahimahullah, was one of these pivotal key people in our Islamic history that we need to understand. He invited Berke Khan and consolidated his faith, taught him the basis of Islam, brought him spirituality, connected him with the rest of the Muslim world in his thinking. And then, using Bukhara as a base, he made a public announcement. So the public announcement from Bukhara went around the Muslim world that Berke Khan, one of the leaders of the Golden Horde, had embraced Islam. This is a major thing, and this is, surprisingly enough, it is before some of the major things that went on. Okay, so he's embracing Islam at that time. So Berke Khan now is a result of the dawah of Saifuddin. Now, who was Saifuddin Barkhazi? He was a poet. He was an Islamic scholar living in that 13th century. Okay, he was born in Bakhaz, right? And this is in the area of Kuhistan in Khorasan. So when you say Khorasan today, you are talking about Afghanistan, Iran. You're looking again the area of Tabriz. People have that on their mind, right? So it's all in this area there. This is where he was born. He got his education in Herat and in Naysapur. And that's important because you'll see that Herat, that's part of Iran, Afghanistan today, right on the border of Iran. And Naysapur, you'll see our great muhaddithin, Imam Muslim, Imam Abu Dawood, right? They're all coming from this area. It was a Sunni area at the time. Okay, so he got his education in this area. He became one of the followers of Sheikh Najmuddin Kubra. Okay, and they gave him the title Sheikh al-Alam. This is the Sheikh of Peace, this well-known, scholar. So this is your pivotal person who makes his move. It was not a military move. It was not a physical stance, as in the case of Saifuddin Qutuz, but it was a spiritual one. It was an ideological one that changed the course of history. And that is important for us to understand as we go forward. And so when Berke came back to the area of the Golden Horde, which is now Russia and here Dagestan and Chechnya and those areas there, even going toward what is now the Ukraine, when he went back into that area, he gave dawah to his family. His wives accepted Islam, other family members, the officials around him. And he eventually takes over from Batu, who was the leader, and he becomes the leader of the Golden Horde. And so your picture on the right is an artist's conception of Hulagu Khan. And he now continues, Hulagu continues on with his blood lust, and he sacks, destroys Baghdad. And this was something that was terrible for all Muslims. And Berdikai Khan, it hurt him personally as a believer, especially when he heard that the Khalifa had been killed. And so his allegiance now was more for Allah and His Messenger than it was for the Mongol dynasty. And this is key because you're talking about an empire that stretched further than any other empire, maybe in the history of humanity. You're talking about soldiers who could fight in the desert, who could fight in the jungle, who could fight in the snow, who could fight underwater, who could fight on ice. You're talking about an amazing group moving from place to place, a seemingly invincible group. How does this go down? This is not magic. You see the hand of Allah Azza wa Jal using the believers, setting the stage, and keep it in mind today, because that's why we're studying this, in order to think about things that we can actually do today in this chaotic world that we are living in. And so Berdikai Khan is upset, and he lets it be known to Hulagu. Hulagu's busy. So Hulagu goes back to Karakorum. You remember what happened? They had to consolidate. Now he's intending to come back now, and his first mission that he has to do before he can bring his thousands of hordes into the Muslim world to destroy everything that Kitbucha could not do with the front forces, he has to deal with Berdikai Khan first. Think about this. Okay? That's the first roadblock. And so what Berdikai Khan does is he has outreach. The Mamluks heard about his Shahada, which is so important. And so they, now Baybars, Sultan Baybars was ruling, and they send a message to Berdikai Khan congratulating him and the Golden Horde and pledging to cooperate. Unity, let's work together now in order to deal with Hulagu. Okay, so this is critical now in your movement and your development of unity. And so Berdikai Khan takes advantage of this with the Golden Horde and unites with the Mamluks. This is a pivotal moment, because what happens is that the great empire of the Mongols is now broken into a section. The western side, which is the Golden Horde and the Ilkhanate, are now fighting against each other. This is a civil war. And so Berdikai and Hulagu started to fight each other, and this broke out in a civil war, and it led to other civil wars. It led to confusion. It helped the Mamluks when what was left of the Mongols came back, because they came back, and they reached Damascus. But now Baybars and the other believers were able to deal with them now, because they had Muslims in the north who were helping them on that side. So this is a critical moment to think about. It is a pivotal moment in our history, which is based upon dawah. It is based upon the call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this shows us one of the great tools in our hands is to call to Allah, to practice Islam. As the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever sees evil, change it with his hand. مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. If you can't change it with your tongue, فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. If you can't do that, if you can't change it with your tongue, meaning say something, then at least feel that it is wrong. But that is the weakest form of faith. And so there's levels. Those who can change with their hands, that may come militarily, that may come economically, whatever your hand can do. Because the hand can do a lot of things. The hand can write. The hand can boycott. The hand can give aid. The hand can unite with other hands. So the hand can do a lot of different things. But if that won't work, then the tongue, the mouth, expressing yourself, as expressing your outrage as to what is happening in Philistine, in Palestine, and other outrages that are going on. Expressing yourself, not just in a negative way, an angry outburst, do it in a positive way. One of the greatest outbursts that we can actually do is to spread Islam, is to counteract Islamophobia, to counteract the lies that have been spread about Islam and Muslims. And so this is the effect of dawah and irshad. Irshad is guidance. And so through this, and it continued on, and there are many different stories. Some of them may be sort of like myths. Some of them may be true stories. There's a story of a great scholar in the Persian area, and he passes this Tughlaq Khan. And Tughlaq Khan was one of the Mongols who hated Muslims. And when the scholar came in his area, Tughlaq said, "What are you doing in this area?" And the scholar said, "I've made a mistake." Tughlaq said, you can die for this, right? And so when he found out this person was a Muslim, he said, "You're no better than a dog." See the insult? But the Muslim said, "I agree. Without the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're worse than dogs." Now that shocked Tughlaq, because the Muslim spoke to power and gave him guidance connected to Islam. So Tughlaq said, "I want to hear more about this Islam." And eventually he accepted Islam. And when he accepted Islam, it is said that a huge amount, thousands of his followers came in. And so that was a form of dawah. There's so many stories about how it came about. And so that is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the believers and through our efforts that helped the Mongols to go from being the worst enemies of Islam that we had ever had up until that time, until they became champions of Islam. So you have Berke Khan, and you have others who are coming up. The Mughal dynasty, the Mongols of India. It's actually Mughal. So that's the Arabic way. That's close, not Mongol. Mughal is the Arabic way. The Mughal is Mughal. Like that is the way in Turkish language to say it. That's right. So Mughal is Mongols. See? And they became champions of Islam, especially in the case of Aurangzeb of the Mongol dynasty, rahimahullah. So this is our pivot that came about not through military, but it came about through a dawah to ilallah, through standing for the truth and being an example of Islam. So I want to open up the floor for any questions or comments that anybody may have. Floor is open.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. I'm new to the class. How do we implement pivotal moments of Islamic history into our life?
Yes, so this is important that we see the question is, how do we implement these pivotal moments into our lives? We need to see first the Prophet ﷺ, his companions, the first three generations, the great scholars, the great strugglers, male and female, not just as people you read about, but as living examples of what to do. So we need to look at them, to try to emulate them, to follow them, to look at how they impacted their society in their time and see how we can implement this thing today. And you can see from the pivots, you see what the Muslims did. It wasn't all just military. If they couldn't do the military, they would speak out. They would practice Islam. They would give dawah. They gave dawah all over the place to the Mongols until they helped them to transfer because their power was so irresistible. Now it became the power of Islam. Okay? So live Islam through the examples that are living examples. Next question.
So we are currently living in a pivotal moment with Palestine. How do we stay patient and help our brothers there?
Yes, so now we're talking about a pivotal moment in Palestine. How do we stay patient? What do we do? Again, this is a whole subject in itself. And if you go back to my Jummah khutbah here last week and the week before, and others, you will see direct information about, how that we need tawakkul, and taqwa, that we should depend upon Allah, we should have the consciousness of Allah. We have to go back to our sources. This is where we have to start living Islam. And that's an important thing. It's not just you say that you're Muslim, but you live as a Muslim. And so with these examples and, trying to get active, even if it's the smallest thing that you do, you make a dua, you give something, you go to a rally, you continue on. But remember, keep in touch with your history and especially the signs of the last day, so you do not get depressed. This is part of a process that we are going through as Muslims, and it will continue until the day of resurrection. Question.
Is it true that our sins are the reason why the Muslims are suffering?
Is it true that our sins are the reason why the Muslims are suffering? Allah knows best. This is part of Sunnatullah. It is the way of Allah, in this world. But to be honest with you, there is a hadith which is reported in Abu Dawood, where the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, "Ummati hadihi ummatun marhuma, laysa alayha adhabun fil akhirah, adhabuha fid dunya, al fitan wa zalazil wal qatl." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "This my nation is a nation that has mercy on it. Its punishment is not in the next life, but the punishment is in this life. Fitan, trials, temptations, confusions. 2, zalazal, earthquakes. And 3, qatl, that's murder, genocide." See what he said? It's like a wake-up call that we will have to go through. When we get slack, Allah wakes us up. And these 3 areas, you can see all 3 areas hitting us today, combined, because we're being prepared for something big that is about to happen in the world. So it's not something that we need to cry about, but it is a reality. It's a wake-up call. So all of us need to make tawbah, to repent, to look at our lives, and to realize that just because you have a Muslim name, just because you speak Arabic or Urdu or Turkish or Kiswahili or Hausa, just because you have something Islamic about you, it's your deeds, your intentions and your deeds. This is the bottom line. Question.
How do I give da'wah to my co-workers and friends?
How to give da'wah to your co-workers and friends? This is the question. The best way is to live Islam. Because there's a lot of words around, there's a lot of confusion around. But if you're living Islam, if you're implementing your Islam with them, and I don't mean you have to stand up and make salat in front of them, but just be honest on the job. Just be modest. Just, speak the truth. Don't be afraid to let people know that you're a Muslim. Give charity, help people out. And the person might say, "Why are you doing this? Why are you not swearing like the rest of the guys on the job? Why are you not smoking drugs and drinking alcohol like everybody else?" Then you can say, "Because I'm a Muslim." Now somebody might then say, "What is a Muslim?" There you are. So that's your inroad. It started with living Islam. This is the most important things that Muslims can do today. Question.
Sheikh, I feel anxiety and sad when I read about what's going on to the Muslims, and in the past how do I stay patient and steadfast, because I know I'm not supposed
The
to.
question is, I'm feeling anxiety and sadness with what happened to the Muslims in the past. But you have to realize, and this is what we are looking at here, with the difficulty came ease. That they were, Muslim took a stand, it changed. That literally it changed. And we saw in the past what happened. Muslims are attacked, and then they rose up. And right after this period, right after this destruction of the Mongols and Mamluks, and Berke Khan taking a stand, it was the golden age of one of the golden ages of Islam. After Baghdad fell, Muslims came back again. So many of the great tafsir like Ibn Kathir and so many books that we're reading today actually happened in the Mamluk period. So it's like a cycle. Our history goes in a cycle. There's a down point, and when we struggle, we're coming back up. And we are rising now. Don't get caught up in the media. Get alternative medias. If you keep watching CNN and BBC, you keep watching that's your only source of information, you will be depressed. Get alternative forms of social media, and you'll understand Muslims are rising. Muslims are fighting back. It's not all bad. There's a positive side to the world that we are living in today. And if you know the signs of the days of judgment, if you study it, you will see we're in the process right now. It's difficult to watch, but we're in the process, and after darkness comes light.
That's it.
So with this point, we will be continuing on, for our next pivotal moment. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bless you and bless the Muslims and make it easy for the Muslims in Palestine and Sudan and all the areas where we are going through struggle. May Allah give us victory. If not, may Allah give us Jannah, and give special blessings to those shaheeds, especially the children who are falling in his path. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.